In the last 2 episodes, I have shared my 3 Bs framework. If you haven't downloaded it yet, it'll be in the show notes, so make sure you download it. But the framework that I developed years ago was around helping us figure out how to equally prioritise 3 different groups of people. So the 3 Bs, just to remind you, are the beneficiary, the business, and the banker. In last week's episode, we went through some different examples of prioritising and really making sure we understood the beneficiary. So I shared some stories with you about how in different businesses like a gym or a clinic, what that looked like and how you actually didn't just make assumptions, but went out and tested things and had those conversations to make sure you were aligning aspects of what actually mattered to that particular audience group. Today, we're switching into the second B, the business. So this is you, your organisation. And really, for the purposes of this, to try to get it as practical as possible, I'm going to tie the aspects of what I talk about to 2 questions. Both of these were sent in by people listening to the podcast. And so my hope is that as I use their questions, you'll start to see your own business or aspects that might make it a bit more practical for you. So let me read you the first question. How do you achieve maximum impact or progress in implementing an environmental, social and governance, so ESG, aspect to your business when you have limited resources? In this particular business, and the leader that sent the question in, the challenge is really around, they've identified that when we think about this aspect of trying to bring more meaning into your business so that you're merging money and meaning, they've said they do want to be able to see more work being done that's intentionally focused on the environmental and social side and the governance aspects within their organisation. But like many people, they're feeling that pressure of, oh, we've got limited resources, so how do we get the biggest bang for our buck? When you take the 3 Bs approach, so if we now look at this related to the business and making decisions from that perspective and use the 3 Bs approach or the framework to dig in a bit, where it's going to help you sharpen the focus on what you actually care about as an organisation and how that connects to your core business activities, that's where the power of this approach will come in. Because when you have limited resources and you're trying to bring more meaning into the business, what we want to make sure we do is not be too scattergun or trying to be doing everything or things that aren't really enough of a driver or motivator for us that we're going to stick at it, because there is some initial work that has to be done. So the first thing I want you to ask yourself, if you're looking at the business and saying, how do we do this work and get the biggest impact with limited resources, is a pretty simple question. It's, does your business care about the outcomes you're naming? So for this business, they've said they're wanting to implement some environmental, social and governance aspects. When we ask the question around, well, do we as a business actually care about this particular outcome that we've named, I would say it's too broad, right? So we need to come back and say, let's dig in and be a bit more particular. Are there certain aspects around social issues that we care about as an organisation, or particular things on the environmental side that we want to look at? So you can use the questions in the download around the 3 Bs to help you sharpen your own thinking as an organisation to get a better outcome. If we ask that initial question, do some of the specifics around potentially, and hopefully it's not just you asking the questions, but talk with others in the organisation. Then to push deeper, you might have said, yeah, we do care about that. I would then be a little bit cheeky and say, really? Like, do you really care about it? Is it just a nice to have surface level thing, or is it actually something that's really important and meaningful to you at either the ownership level, or at least the executive level of the organisation that are making decisions and prioritising the spend and focus area within the organisation. The best way for you to take this approach and get answers that are meaningful is to start to pull out some stories. So when you say, yes, it is important to us, and then I say, is it really important? Think of what would the stories be that you would tell me. If we were having this conversation and you were trying to identify the centrality of this piece that you've identified, what stories would you tell me to bring it to life and show me why you are an organisation that cares about this issue? And then what are the examples that show in the way you're currently making decisions, or how historically you have prioritised things, or how you've spent money? What are those examples that demonstrate this is important to you as an organisation? It's okay if you don't have those, but if they don't exist, then that gives us your answer in terms of you may not have yet landed on the key thing that is going to be important enough to you as an organisation to really be the entry point for merging money and meaning in your organisation. I want to draw your attention to some of the other tools that I've already given you in previous episodes that are going to be helpful for you here. If when you get to this point and you're looking for the stories and the examples to check if you've picked something that is central enough, if you're struggling, go back to the origin story. I shared with you, again, a free download that had some questions around trying to dig in and help you think about what were the issues that existed when you started the business? What were you drawn to in terms of something you wanted to create or a gap in the market that you saw? Or what were the aspects you were pushing back against? And remember, these don't all have to be at the level of eradicating poverty or clean water. They can be down at the level of the fact that you were frustrated that everyone in your industry was charging people too much and didn't care about the quality of the results they were delivering. And you really wanted to be known for caring for your customers and delivering great results, right? So it can be at that level. But in your origin story, it's going to help you get some of the clues to answer these questions. We then move into the second part of exploration in digging into the business side of what's important and what are the questions we ask to strengthen this approach. The second question I would get you to ask yourselves is, are the outcomes you're talking about central and a key part of the operations of your business? If you think back to the piece I'm trying to help you build into your business model around having an internal focus to the contribution you make, not an external focus. If we go with this example around the question from the organisation saying how would they implement environmental, social and governance approaches into their business with limited resources, if when they started to tell me stories and had answered these questions I just ran through with you, if all of the examples they gave were still related to them partnering with a non-profit or having their staff go out and volunteer or at Christmas time making a donation, if we were only seeing those types of stories and examples, then this next question that's talking around, is it in the core business, the operations of the business that this actually, you see it play out? We would then know, okay, they might be great things you're doing and connected to something you care about, but we're wanting to use this framework to help us drill in and start to identify how we could do things related to that issue we care about, but more in the operational side of the business. So for environmental, social and governance issues, it would be not just seeing a partner or a non-profit as a way to contribute to the issue, but actually looking at our own operations and saying, could we have a different way that we think about the electricity we use in our office, or our recycling program, or providing spaces so people can ride bikes to work instead of drive. So these are those pieces of using this question to drill it into the actual decisions you have control over at the level of your business, your organisation. Pick to that business model with the ticks inside the business model, not just contributions sitting outside your organisation. Does that make sense? I'm hoping it's a kind of helpful way to use two really simple questions. And again, you can use the download to go into this for you and your business. I want to now shift gears and come at it from another angle. So I've got another question that someone asked, which was, beyond donations to causes and paying my team a reasonable wage, how can I make a difference in the AI and online media space? So this is quite a specific question, but again, depending what industry you're in, you can take it to be more relevant for you. But I do think it's a useful one, because what you'll see in the framing of that question is that there's still this underlying piece of saying there's some low-hanging fruit, if you like, some easy bits where once I've said I care about this particular issue or this is important to us as an organisation, our minds still do tend to go to, okay, so I will make a donation, or then for my team, let's be a decent human and pay them properly. But it's hard to then know what next. And if you are struggling with that, or feeling like, oh, my business isn't really inherently purposeful, or, in an industry that it makes sense that, oh, I'm contributing through the very core business activities. If you're struggling with that, then this question might be a helpful one for you. So I mentioned already the origin story, and that worksheet and the questions that we got you to ask there can be really helpful in these explorations of looking at the business as the driver. So when you use that origin story and the questions I got you to ask there, you can find a way to read back through what you wrote, or if you are a visual person and you drew a little map and a timeline of the journey, then use that to draw out the patterns. Use that to see what is actually important and is driving you as an organisation. The aspects around your version of contribution and what purpose is to you are usually found in those origin story examples. And so with AI and the online media space as the example in this question, the things that I would dig into beyond the origin story are things like saying, okay, let's think about it from this angle. What are the negative impacts of the industry that I'm in? So it may not be obviously in a positive or purpose-driven space. So let's flip to the other side and say, are there negative aspects of this industry that I don't like? Are there things that I could then actually frame as something I am pushing against or trying to address? That can be an easy way in for this type of organisation to think about contribution. The next is to look for missed opportunities in your industry and say, are there aspects where when I look at my competition, when I look at what is the common way to run a business in the AI and online media space, where do I see there's a need or a gap in the market that no one's really filling, that I could actually address through my business? And then the third angle I would take when trying to have a better response and integrating this in an industry that doesn't feel inherently purpose-driven is to say, are there certain groups that are being excluded? So if we looked at this, the AI online media space, and I was thinking of those questions I just ran you through around aspects of negative impacts, missed opportunities, or certain groups being excluded, they can start to paint a picture for me of how I could position my organisation and bring that sense of purpose and meaning into our work in really genuine and meaningful ways. So you could look at things like in the AI space, there's actually a lot of research that talks about the fact that when different pieces are developed and the codes and things are written, it actually matters whether there's diversity in those organisations. Because when we are writing and setting up technology in a way that has unconscious bias, that doesn't think about or have the experience of living as anything other than a white male, which is usually where you have kind of a tech space sitting, there's a whole bunch of unintended consequences. So you could say, there's actually really negative impacts happening in our area based on a lack of diversity. We also see people being left out and missed opportunities in terms of market gaps there that could be filled. Depending on your organisation, you might then say, well, that's interesting because actually we have a really diverse team and we bring a completely different perspective to this. If that happens to be your angle, lean into that. That's just one example, but use those 3 questions I've given you and start to say, rather than just say there's nothing contribution or purposeful about our industry, look at it from the opposite angle. What's wrong with it? What's missing? Who's being left out? And then from that place, identify, do any of those particular things excite you or light you up? When we think about the fact we're trying to go to what drives us, what will motivate us to really embed this in our business, I want you to find the things that you actually care about. So which of those aspects that you've mapped out or the pieces that you as a team have come up with actually light you up? And then here's what's going to be the version. In the previous example, I talked to you about, do you really care about it? And then I went into how is it integrated into your core business operations. For this example, the way we get into the core business operations is to say, we've asked, does it light you up? Which bit lights you up? Now I want you to think about the aspects of where are you uniquely positioned, where as an organisation you actually have something of value to add here to this particular issue. That there is something in the way you operate, the way you are set up, who's in your organisation. There's a unique aspect that positions you to offer something different into that market that actually is meaningful. And when we bring all of those pieces together, can you see that by just asking some specific questions, taking a different perspective, what we've done here is not land with all of these nice disconnected ideas or possibilities, but we've started to do the merging of money and meaning. We've started to integrating it into our business model, because connecting it is what will make the difference here. And it will be the piece that actually helps us avoid the initial part of the first question around, oh, we've got limited resources. While ever we stay in a headspace that is saying doing this work is an additional cost or a distraction, we will not get the benefits of it. What I want you to do by asking these questions and taking the approach I'm suggesting is to be able to really get to a place where it's irrelevant whether you're having a good year or not. It's irrelevant whether resources are tight, because you've actually done the thinking that means by taking this approach, you are strengthening the financial stability and you are increasing your contribution that actually brings the meaning and purpose into the work that you're doing. So I hope that those two questions were helpful for those of you who are still struggling to figure out what the meaning piece looks like in your business. I do want to encourage you that if you're in that category, lots of people are. I've been having conversations lately about, I need to do a better job of helping those of you who don't have the go-to answer of like, oh yes, we have this really clear meaning and purpose in our work. And so I hope that today's questions gave you a different entry point. And I really do encourage you to grab the download with the 3 Bs, use those questions, and maybe go back and look at your origin story pieces if you already have notes on that. Next aspect of where to kind of go from here is that if you're finding this helpful, but you enjoy that more structured process of like having some questions, getting me to guide you through these pieces, there's a limit to how much I can do that through this format of the podcast. But to try to overcome that and help you have an opportunity to be live with me and work through that, we have our next round of the free masterclass coming up. And so I want you to jump into the show notes if you're curious to be able to go a bit deeper on this. And you'll see the link to register for the masterclass. As I said, it's free, but it's going to have the benefit of you'll actually be live with me. So when we're doing these questions, you can kind of go, I don't understand. Tell me this. Let me dig in. Is this what you mean? And that piece for me is both more energizing for me. And I think that what it will allow you to do is anything that you're not yet able to, like you keep coming up against a block, which means that this stays in the category for you of it's interesting, you know it's important, but you'll get to it one day. Use the masterclass as the piece that kind of pushes you into action and helps this to shift out of just being an intellectual conversation and makes it practical for you. So jump on to the link, register, even if you can't join us live, there'll be replays, and really take that opportunity to be with me live and ask those questions. The two last pieces before we wrap up that I wanted to just talk you through around this aspect of encouraging you that you're not alone and that you're not the only person struggling with things is to say that with the joining us for the masterclass and being able to go into this a little bit more, if you are feeling like the way that business operates at the moment for you is that you've got all of these competing demands and there aren't the filters already present in your organization from a decision-making point of view to help you prioritize and navigate all of the complexity that you're dealing with, then that is a good sign that the masterclass is going to be helpful for you, because the exact pieces that we're going through and the questions and the 4 pillars that we'll work through are really about sharpening that piece of not just off-the-shelf answers, but your answers to create the filters to prioritize and make decisions more effectively. So if you're in that category, good sign that you should join us. And then the other piece that would be a signal that the masterclass would be a good use of your time is if part of what you're experiencing is the overwhelm and the struggle to stay relevant in amongst the rapid changes that are happening. So if you're in that category and as you listen to the podcast, you keep finding yourself going, oh my gosh, this is too complicated to actually have the time to get my head around. I feel like there's so many things I don't understand. Then again, quickest way for you to get out of that place and to start to be able to identify where you do have gaps that you need to fill. And here's a step-by-step process to go through it, is the way that I want to offer to you. The invitation is there that we can shift you out of that space of feeling like the rapid change, not knowing how to stay relevant. There's too many moving pieces. That is actually a really easy one for us to address. Hopefully today's episode has given you some of those levers that you can pull, some questions you can ask and explorations. But again, jump in, sign up, and I hope to see you at the masterclass.